Bruchim haboim. Welcome everyone. We're about to begin Be'ezras Hashem together on Daf Zayin Amud Aleph. Start with the last line of Daf Vav Amud Beis. Our Mishnah states when you have surplus moisar, for example, when it comes to shkalim, a person says, Eilu hare eilu shikli. These are going to go towards my machatzis hashekel obligation. So whatever is extra the moisar, the Mishnah is soisim like by Hillel, it goes to chulin. So therefore, when he gathers and saves up his coins till he finally gets machatzis hashekel, and then he has a surplus, lo and behold, that extra amount, that moisar, goes to chulin. The Mishnah then states a klal and says, when there is moisar shlomim, it goes to shlomim. Moisar oila goes to oila. Moisar mincha goes to mincha. Moisar chatos ve'ashamos that are obligatory types of korbanos, they go towards nidava. And finally, the Mishnah at the end states the din of a nazir, a personal nazir. If there's moisar nazir, it goes to nidava. Again, nidava means that when there is a lull in the mizbeach, in other words, we don't want the mizbeach to be batil, so when there's no korbanos being brought, there's a special fund that contributes to oilos of the community. So the nidava is a voluntary oilos offering of the community, and that's what the nazir, the personal nazir's moisar goes towards. The Gemara now qualifies this when it says moisar nazir nidava. Rav Chizda Omar on top of Zayin Amud Aleph, Rav Chizda says, V'hu shekarvo chatosoi basoif. The nazir brings three different karbonos: a karban oila, a karban shlomim, and a karban chatos. And says Rav Chizda, when is it that we say in the Mishnah that the surplus, the moisar of the karban of the nazir, will go towards a nedava? That's when the last that is brought is the chatos. However, aval ikarvu shlomim basoif, then moisaron shlomim. But Rav Chizda says if the other one of the karbonos is brought at the end, for example, if it's the shlomim that's brought at the end, then the shlomim will be the moisar. Similarly, if the oila is brought at the end, then also the oila will be brought as a moisar. In other words, dafka, if it's the chatos of the three karbonos that's brought at the end, that will then provide the moisar to be nidava. Omer Rabbi Zeira, afilu karvu shlomim levasoif. Even if the shlomim and huadin, the oila, would be brought at the end, that also would then have the surplus, the moisar, to be nidava. And he explains, because halacha achas hi ben nazir. Shetiyeh moisora nidava. We have a halacha lamosh misinai telling us that no matter what of the three korbanos is at the end, that will also then ultimately bring a moisora of a nidava. In other words, he's choylek on Rav Chizda, because Rav Chizda is saying that just as when it comes to, in general, the klal that we said in the Mishnah, when there's an chatos or an asham, the surplus, the moisar, goes to nedava. So to over here, when the last of the three korbanos of the nazir is extra, and that's a chatos, then it will be nedava, but other ones not, because the Mishnah states in its klal that the noisar shlomim, the noisar oila. On that, Rav Zeira argues, and he says, no, we have a halacha lamosh misinai that when it comes to the nazir, no matter what the three korbanos will then be at the end, it'll always be a moisar of nedava. The Gemara now brings masnisa messiah ledain umasnisa messiah ledain. There's a brisa that supports Rav Chizda. There's also a brisa that supports the other opinion of Rabbi Zeira, as follows. Masnisa messiah Rabbi Zeira, that brisa that supports Rabbi Zeira. Again, Rabbi Zeira is the latter opinion that we just said, that says we have Allah lamosh misinai that no matter what the last korban will bring, the moisar will be the nedava. It states as follows in the brisa: Eilu hein mos stumin. The brisa asks, what are mos stumin? Now, mos stumin really means unidentifiable mos, money, because it's mixed together. Now the brisa explains more further what exactly is this mos stumin. It says kol shedmei chatos. We'll use the gears of the gra. Mu'uravois bohen. all of the money of the chatos that is mixed together with those, meaning the other ones, namely the oila and the shlamim of the nazir. And even if he separates the money of the chatos from the other parts of the oila and the shlamim, so he has all these coins together and he separates the chatos, still ma'os tumin hein. They still have the din of ma'os tumin. And the ma'os tumin's din is that it's brought as nedava. So here we have a support for Rabbi Ze'era, because even though the chatos was taken out, nonetheless, and you still have the other, the shlamim and the oila, the nedava ultimately would then be brought for the moisar, as Rabbi Ze'era said. Now the Gemara brings a brisa that supports the other opinion of Rav Chisda. Masnisa Messiah l'Rav Chisda. We have a brisa that supports Rav Chisda, and again Rav Chisda stated that only when the chatos is brought at the end of the 3 korbanos of the nazir, then that we say the moisar will go to nedava. Eilu lechatos, says the brisa, v'hashar l'shar nizirusi umes. Here you have somebody who designated, he had a bunch of coins, he designated some of those to a korban chatos, he's a nazir, for a korban chatos, and the rest for his nizirusi, the hainu, for the oilos and the shlamim. And he died. The Brisa goes on to say, moyalin bekulon. If indeed they're all going to be used, then if it was misused, then it'll be a case of mi'ila. Now, mi'ila over here is talking about by kochek, the din is that the kochek kadoshim is going to be chal mi'ila right away, whereas kochim kalim is only after the dam is put on the mizbeach. So therefore, over here it says, if you're mo'alin bekulon, that means all of them, because then you certainly then were using kochek kadoshim, the hainu chatos, then there'll be me'ila. Ve'ein mo'alin b'mikzosim. But if you only then use some of those coins, you can always then say that we can suggest that those coins that were used were of kachim kalim, whereby there's no me'ila. V'loy amar, the Gemara comments, and the Brisa loy amar imeis yipul nedava. The Brisa doesn't say that if he dies, then he goes to nedava, meaning to say that if indeed it's so that it would be a korban of kachei kadashim, so then if it's kachei kadashim, meaning to say if it would be a nedava, then it would be considered to be kachei kadashim, because it would be a form of an oila, whereby then even if it was going to be a situation of mitzvah, it would also be me'ila, because kachei kadashim is me'ila right away. So it must be you see from over here that no, that indeed we don't say that it had within it the moisar being are going to be a nedava, because once the chatos is separated, so then we say that everything else, the moisar will not necessarily be will not be the nedava, but rather it will be whatever is last. If it's going to be a shlamim, it'll be a shlamim. If it will be an oila, it'll be an oila. Rav Chisda Omar, Rav Chisda says, Moisar lachmoi shel nazir yurkov. The moisar, the surplus of the lechem of the nazir has to bring also matzos. So that lechem, if there's moisar, let's say he designated to buy those matzos and he has extra, then those are going to be yurkov. Those are going to have to then go bad. You're going to have to leave it so that it becomes bad and you can't get hana from it. For let's say example, he baked them and then he died and didn't bring them. What happens to those that lechem, that moisar? So you have to leave it yurkov. Rav Yosi said v'yeus, and indeed it's correct what was just stated by Rav Chisda, that the moisar lachmo of the nazir is yurkov, because he explains because lahakrivoy b'fnei atzmoy ein at yochel, to makriv the lechem on its own, you're not allowed to. She'ein l'chol lechem korev la'atzma, because you don't bring lechem on its own without the korban. Lahakrivoy im nizirois Acheres, ein at yochel. To bring this lechem with a different nazir's carbon, that also not possible because she'ein lecha nazirois ba b'loy lechem, because the nazir who brings his carbon, he must also donate the lechem together with it. So that's also not a possibility. So therefore it's correct, he supports Rav Chizda's statement that's saying that it's Yurkov. Lefum kain, therefore, says the Gemara, tzorich meimar, moisar lachmoi shel nazir Yurkov. Therefore, he concludes that you must say the additional lechem of the nazir has to be Yurkov. The Gemara now brings Savrin Meimar. The students, the Talmidim of the Beis HaMedrash, they thought to say that just like you just said, the moisar of the lechem of the nazir is Yurkov, then hu lachmoi hu moisar nesachav. Also, when it comes to the additional wine libations, that also would have to be Yurkov. The same din. Omer Rabbi Yosi bar Rabbi Bun, and he comes and he says, really, lefi what the sheet of Rav Chizda, that's not so. Moisar nesachav koche kadoshim inun. The wine libations have the din of koche kadoshim. The yipul nedava, and as koche kadoshim are, they go to nedava, just like we saw in the klal in the Mishnah. Echatas and the asham. If there's moisar, it goes to the nedava. So to over here, the moisar nesachav will go to nedava. So that's what Rabbi Yosi bar Rabun said in the name of Chizda to correct the Talmidim. The Gemara now says, we'll use the girsa of the Gra, the following. Says the Gemara, Al das the Rabbi Yosi Barbun, that which Rabbi Yosi Barbun just said, in the name of Rav Chizda, Ushmuel, V'Rav Chia, Rabbi Elozar, Shloishton Amru Dover Echot. The three of them said one thing. The Gemara explains what that means, that they said one thing. Says the Gemara, Rab Chia Hada Amoron. As we just said, meaning to say really is Rab Yosi bar Rav Bun, and Rav Chiz, not Rav Chia but Rav Chizda rather, is Hada Amoron. Meaning to say that we just said that the moisar of the nesachim will be for nedava. Shmuel, the Omar Rabbi Yosi ad the anatamon. Shmuel that said that Rabbi Yosi said, Shmuel, the Omar Rabbi Yosi ad anatamon. Rabbi Yosi said that when I was still there in Bovel, Shamis kal Rabbi Yehuda sha'il Shmuel. I heard Rabbi Yehuda ask Shmuel the following question. By the way, this is what appears in Amud Beis before, in Vav Amud Beis that we saw. And he said he heard the following question to Shmuel. Hifrish shikloi umeis. If a person was mafrish, a machzis hashekel, and he died, what happens at machzis hashekel? Again, machzis hashekel goes towards the korbanos tzibur as a kapara. So the mace doesn't get kapara if he died. So therefore, what happens at Machzis HaShekel was not yet given towards the communal offerings. Says the Gemara, Amar Le Shmuel responded, Yiplu Nidafa, the Moisa Machzis HaShekel, when a person then died, will go toward the Nidava. So we see that he indeed also said the similar answer that Rav Chizda had just said in regards to the Nesachim, that it falls to Nidava. And we have another opinion that also says like this, that it falls to Nidava in a different place. Rabbi Elazar, Oimer, Moisar Asiris, Ha'efa Shaloi. When it comes to the Kohen Gadol, he brings a certain mincha called Chavitas Mincha, and every day he brings that mincha, which is Asiris Ha'efa. If he has Moisar, the Asiris Ha'efa, what happens to it? It's a machlokes. Rabbi Yochanan Omar Yolichem LeYam HaMelech. He throws the Yam HaMelech Aser Bahana. However, Rabbi Elazar's choylek, and he says, Rabbi Elazar Omer Yiplu LeNedava. It falls to Nedava. So here we have three different opinions that are saying Shloish Na'amu Davar Echad, that they both are saying, all three are saying that they fall to Nedava. The first one was Rav Chizda, which is really what Rabbi Yosi bar Rabbi Bun said in the name of Rav Chizda, that when it comes to Nesachim, it'll be Yipol and Nedava. Then we had Shmuel's response in regards to somebody who's mafrish Masechet Shekalim and he dies, that is Yipul L'Nedava. And finally, the last scenario we have when a person, a Kohen Gadol, has extra from his Asiras Ha'efa, the Minchas Chavita, so then that also is Yipulu L'Nedava.